Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 37 of On the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jody Lai, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And my name is Dan Alika, and I am AutoTrader's road test editor. That was quite the flourish on simple.
I like to change it up sometimes, give them different levels. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's simple.
Simple!
So today, Dan and I are going to be talking about a whole bunch of cars that we must say goodbye to because they are getting discontinued by the end of this year.
Pour one out.
So this happens all the time. Cars get discontinued for all sorts of different reasons. But this time it feels a little bit different because there are a lot of different types of cars that are getting discontinued. Some of these are surprising. Some of these are not surprising at all.
Yeah. And there's been weird ones in the past, like, just kind of for the sake of understanding, it's like, Hyundai discontinued the Accent a few years ago. Now the sedan went away because nobody was buying it, and then the hatchback went away, and that was kind of a direct result of the Venue being added to the lineup, and don't let, Hyundai or any other car company fool you. That's purely like financial motives because the Venue is more expensive. The profit margins on it are way higher.
Yeah.
So Hyundai wants to sell you a more expensive vehicle. Therefore, it replaced a cheap one with an expensive one. But if you take a look at some of the ones that we're going to go through today, it's age related, it's powertrain related. There are lots of different factors at play.
Yeah, especially now because we're kind of seeing a lot more automakers go more heavily into EVs and PHEVs. And so,
PHEVs, you mean?
PHEVs. I don't like saying it, but
I'm
trying to get used to it, but whatever. So we're just going to run down this list kind of alphabetically and reminisce about why we loved or hated these cars.
Okay.
And kind of the reasons for why they're getting discontinued.
All right.
So the first one I'm super sad about. The Audi R8 is going away. This is the last year that it will ever be available, at least in its current kind of setup, which is fully internal combustion, with a V10.
Yeah. It's a good car, but yeah, it's a dinosaur.
By car standards, it's very old. It has been around
I just
for
mean
a long
like
time.
from like the actual like concept of what it is. Like a V8, supercar. It's like kind of silly that I'm surprised it lasted this long.
I mean, people love supercars.
Yeah, but I don't know. It seems weird. I mean, I look forward to whatever is next. And I think like Audi, being back into racing is going to be a huge help for whatever comes next in terms of like hybrid and pure electric.
Yeah, I think so too. So the next time we see an R8, if it's even called an R8, let's call it a supercar from Audi. It'll probably be fully electric or a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah, because we're seeing that with some brands. I mean, it's ironic to me that this is the year that the last year that the R8 will be available, and then the Mercedes-AMG GT Coupe is coming back. Now, I was actually just having this conversation with another journalist this weekend about how, as much as they're different, so the R8 is a mid-engine, V10, the GT is a front-engine, rear-wheel drive, twin-turbocharged V8. But that, to me, those two, that's the ultimate cross-shop. If you're looking at an R8, the one to look at would have been the AMG GT and vice versa, and now the GT is coming back as a gas-only,
I mean, not for much
car.
Longer. I don't think it's going to be around for much longer, but
But it's crazy that Mercedes, spent all this money and is undertaking this big project for something that conceivably might only last a few years.
Yeah, that's an interesting, especially because they're going really hard into EVs too, so it's interesting that they'll have this, just awesome gas-powered sports car still available. But another one that we'll be saying goodbye to is the Audi TT. So little tiny sports car. It's iconic.
Cool car.
I really enjoy driving it.
The TT RS was so cool.
Yeah.
Do you know, here's the story. So years ago, I went to Le Mans, and I was there with Porsche, but some of the race team, like engineers and just, people kind of behind the scenes, they used to work on the Audi Le Mans program and then went over to Porsche when Audi's program folded. And there was this person telling me that she was part of the Audi TT team at Le Mans this would have been, I don't know, call it like 20 years ago.
Okay.
And they got like heat from the executive level because the TT was spanking the R8.
Yeah.
It was just like more reliable. It was quicker through the corners, and it was just outperforming it in like every possible
That's
way.
hilarious.
And they're like, you're embarrassing our supercar.
Yeah.
The TT is like super underrated, I think.
I think it really is, especially with that like quirky 5-cylinder engine.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah.
And like it's a really unusual little sports car.
I once described it as it looks like a Volkswagen Beetle that was put in a panini press.
Yeah, that's very accurate. And I always thought it was fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Peter Schreier designed it.
Yeah, that was an iconic design, and it will go down in like the history books as like a really memorable one. So
Totally.
that's we're kind of sad to see that one go.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime like a sports car, like a little fun sports car goes away, it like cuts really deep, you know?
Yeah. And now for something completely different.
Yeah, so I'm going to mention these three kind of in the same section because they're all related. So Chrysler 300, goodbye. Dodge Challenger, goodbye. Dodge Charger, goodbye.
I like how like not goodbye. See you around. Hit the bricks.
For what they were, like I actually really liked the Chrysler 300 for what it was, which was like a big, comfy sedan.
Yeah, and I mean they're all three of those are built in Brampton, Ontario, and they were kind of the longevity of them. I think is a big deal, right? They've been around for like 15 plus years.
They're so old,
and you know, they are, I guess, kind of cool. It's funny to watch the resurgence, especially of the Challenger. So the coupe of the three of them, it always trailed the Mustang and the Camaro in the sales charts. And then it surpassed them, even though nothing really changed.
No, it's basically been exactly the same. You know, it came out in 2008, got a mid-cycle refresh in like 2015, but essentially the same thing. It's besides a little like tweaks and stuff.
And then just I think the popularity, you know, you could reasonably trace it back to just like the introduction of, you know, the Hellcat and the Demon and the Red Eye. That's why you see so many like, you know, V6 versions, and they came out with the all-wheel drive version. I'm sure that helped the GT or whatever it was called. But
it was so old school. Like I really enjoyed the Charger and the Challenger actually because they had so much personality. And like the Camaro and the Mustang these days, they're great cars. They're great sports cars. But I think the Dodges stayed the most true to that like old school muscle car mentality out of those three.
Yeah. It's also, we talked about this because I don't know if by the time this episode goes live, no, I don't think your review of the Challenger Last Call will be published yet. But Jody did a review of this Challenger that's called like the Last Call, but it's like there were like 8 last calls.
I think there were 7,
there
and this
go.
Was like the
last call. It's so outrageous.
But it was so stupid for a car because it was a pig on gas, can barely take a corner, you know, V8 rear wheel drive, manual transmission. And it doesn't make sense, but I loved it so much. Like I enjoyed driving it so much. So I am sad to see it go. The next time we see a Challenger, it'll be fully electric. Yeah. And I'm certain it's going to be really cool when it gets here. Like the concept car it's based on looks sick. But I don't know. There's something just about like a rip snorting dirty old V8 that I love.
I'm over it. Maybe I'm just bitter at all the idiots that drive them. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not everyone that drives them is an idiot, but like there are so many clowns cruising around in these things, you know, driving like they're on a racetrack or a drag strip, and it just like, you know, it's really kind of like ruined. Like I honestly, when we did the Red Eye last year, I was like, I don't want to be like part of the, you know, stereotype here. I didn't like driving it because I was like, people are looking at me like that guy. That car
turns you into a ghoul. Like
you love that.
I love that.
Ooh. That's what every time you're like, it turns me into a ghoul. I picture you like with a white sheet, like a ghost,
just
like
scaring
an old
people
school
in the streets. Yeah. What would you say? Like a car that turns you evil, like into a bad driver, or like a really aggressive driver?
A BMW driver.
Yeah.
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 This is a car that transforms you into a BMW driver.
Chris said something so funny the other day. He's like, yeah, I really appreciate BMW. They have so many different types of cars that can appeal to so many different types of D-bags.
That's true.
And I thought it was so funny. But
The only commonality between, all of the BMW models is apparently that signals are optional.
you know what? To be fair, these days, I feel like BMW drivers aren't the worst. I think they've been replaced by Tesla drivers.
I think you might be right.
That's
but
gonna get me in trouble. But like, that's a hill I will die on.
even this morning on my way in, I was waiting and there was a BMW driver behind me, and we were like taking a left, and I was like, oh, no signal. And then we had to take a right, oh, no signal.
Yeah.
And then turned it again, no signal. And I'm like, you're
Fueling
living
the
proof.
stereotype,
Oh,
man. Yeah.
Yeah. What a ghoul.
I gotta think of a better word. The Ford Edge will be discontinued at the end of this year.
I think that, so we have another episode coming about cars or vehicles we thought were ahead of their time. I wouldn't necessarily say the Edge was ahead of its time, but I do think it was kind of like on the cusp of being something super killer, but it just never really, don't get me wrong, it was popular, but it was also like, it's kind of an appliance.
I think so, and that segment has so many heavy hitters in it, so I think it made it very hard for the Ford Edge to really pull forward.
But I think it's cool, and that's another Canadian built. That one's built in Oakville, Ontario. That plant is being converted into an EV. We don't know exactly what's going to be built there yet, but that's another Canadian vehicle that we're bidding adieu.
Yeah, it's always.
Wait. I don't want to offend our friend. Adieu.
There you go.
Yeah.
We do have people who listen.
I just
to
wanted to make sure
Quebec.
nobody thought I was like, being disrespectful to the language. But that one I will miss in kind of the sense. But I think it's like, oh, what could have been? Like it was that close to being like the ST version. I remember you drove the ST, and you were like, this thing is not very good.
I thought something was wrong with the car because nothing worked the way that it should have worked. Like the transmission was a mess. Everything was just not working.
But then when Ford put out the Explorer ST, that thing was everything that it should have been.
Yeah.
Like a total weapon. It was like, 460 horsepower or something like that. So I just feel like the Edge was kind of like the
forgotten child or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a totally different note, the Kia Rio is being discontinued.
Wow.
Now,
R.I.P.
This makes me very sad because there's so many of these like small, affordable cars that no longer exist. Honda Fit, Nissan Micra, Toyota Yaris, all of these cheap, cheerful, affordable cars are gone.
Yeah.
And what that means is that new car prices will go up because, like Dan said, they're going to try to sell you a crossover that's the same size, but, a little bit more expensive. And that creates a lot of pressure in the used car market for these models.
Yeah, and it just, it creates this big gulf in affordability and also just like accessibility, right? I mean, it's not just about, forget interest rates and stuff like that. Those are crazy right now. But I mean, come on, we've all either been or are at points in our lives, or we know people that are at points in their lives where it's like, I had this conversation with a friend once about the idea of, what's easier to save $500 a month to put towards a car or to finance a vehicle at $500 a month. Of course, the financing is easier because it gives you access to the vehicle now, which is when you need it. And that's what I look at, where these cars that we're losing represent, accessibility to jobs for people.
Absolutely.
Right? Especially with the job market and the real estate market, this big disparity of people in Toronto, for instance, right? It's so unaffordable in the city that people have to commute, just so that they can afford an apartment. But these cheap cars were the way to do that.
Yeah, and now that they no longer exist, what's happening is that people can't afford these new crossovers that are being offered to them, so they go to the used market. And now what's happening is that because the new car inventory for these small, affordable cars is so small, now the used car inventory for these cars gets more expensive, and it creates this big problem.
Yeah, and the squeeze, that the pandemic caused. Like, you see this all the time, right? Anytime there's big, and we had we had our VP of Insights, Barish, on a handful of episodes ago, and we talked a little bit about this. But, you know, anytime there's like an economic downturn or something major that happens, you see this squeeze because people end up holding on to their vehicles for longer. So that also puts a big damper on the used car market. So affordability in general is way down, and losing access to these new affordable cars is hugely disappointing. And I also understand that the sales don't represent numbers proportionally that they used to, but still, right now, the only vehicle that you can buy in Canada for less than like, you know, 15 grand or whatever is the Mitsubishi Mirage.
It's the only one left. And it's a shame because the Kia Rio was a really good car. Yeah. It always felt like it was not like penalizing you for being on a budget. Like I think it came standard with heated seats and a heated steering wheel, which is crazy at that price. Yeah. So I'm really sad to see that one go, and to see small cars disappearing in general. Yeah. The Kia Stinger will also be discontinued this year, which I'm not surprised to see because honestly, like, not a lot of people bought it.
No, and I think that was it was a halo product. Yeah. It was like, I think that, you know, anecdotally, like, kind of put Kia on the map in a certain sense.
A new way.
Yeah, like people looked at Kia in a different way and said, oh wow, you can do something that's kind of like exciting and different. It was always a little bit disappointing. Do you remember like that Stinger Coupe concept? And then, like, you know, the Hyundai Genesis Coupe. And I was like, oh, it would have been really cool if that's the direction that Kia went instead.
Yeah, but they would have made it even less popular by doing that, right?
Oh, for sure.
I think by making it a liftback sedan, you have to make certain compromises.
Yeah,
right?
I just mean like knowing that it wasn't going to sell very well anyways. But yeah, it was important to the brand. I think the brand's identity changed, or the perceived identity changed a lot since that was introduced in 2016, I think, somewhere around there.
2017, I think. I drove it for the first time.
Yeah. So.
And it was very impressive. It did kind of change or start a new chapter for the brand. Yeah. At that time, they had hired a whole bunch of engineers and designers from, you know, German companies like BMW and Audi and stuff. Yeah. And so this was kind of proof to the world that, like, hey, we could do this too. Yeah. And it was a really good effort.
And in fairness, like, a lot of the powertrain was borrowed from or jointly developed with the Genesis team. Yeah. So the I always get confused because of the SUVs. The G70, right?
The sedan, yeah.
The sedan shared the same, like, twin turbocharged V6 or whatever it was, and
it was good.
But there was no manual version of the Stinger, and there was a manual version of the G70.
Only for 1 year, though. I don't even count that as being.
No, I think it was a couple of years. The Sport.
I thought it was only 1 year in Canada.
No, the G70 Sport.
I think Americans got it. They might have gotten.
No, I think they
got
a rear-wheel drive Stinger when we didn't.
Right, because ours came standard in all-wheel drive. Yeah. Okay.
So again, that was one of those things that I'm like, oh, like, you know, it would have been cool if you were not going to do the coupe, then do this manual version. And again, I know it wouldn't have sold very well, but anyways, I think it did the job that Kia had set out.
I think so too. Yeah, and I'm excited to see what that sedan would look like as an EV. I think that's the clear next step that they're going towards. So that's exciting. Yeah. The Mazda CX-9 is going away after this year, which makes sense because now we have the CX-90, which is a 3-row, a little bit bigger than the CX-9.
Yeah, a little more, like, it's not the biggest in the segment by any stretch, but the CX-9 was always a little cramped in the third row. The CX-90 is just more, you know, conventionally sized, I would describe it. Like, I feel like it's like almost identically sized to like the Hyundai Palisade or the Nissan Pathfinder. Like,
maybe like a tiny bit smaller, but very, very similar. And the CX-9 was always like a weird in-between kind of model. So there's a bunch of Mercedes vehicles being discontinued. The CLS, the C-Class Coupe and convertible, the E-Class Coupe and convertible. And the reason why they're all being discontinued is because they basically like cannibalize each other in their lineup. So they're all being replaced by a single new model line called the CLE-Class.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I remember in 2016 when we worked together and talking about this, and we were talking about the E-Class, and you were saying how much you liked it. And my take was like, but, you know, because you loved the window in the back, like the E-Class, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, as soon as you see it, you'll recognize it. It had that, it's a coupe, but it had this like almost like a full rear window, and you could roll it down, and it was super cool. But my point was always like, but why have all of these versions of the same car?
There were so many. So the E-Class had a coupe, sedan, convertible, wagon, and like different variants of the wagon. Like it was just a humongous lineup. So Mercedes is kind of streamlining their lineup with this new model, which makes a lot of sense to me, especially because like I really think that it's just easier for a consumer to understand like what's going on. So not surprised to see that one go, or those vehicles going.
Yeah.
The Nissan Maxima is going away. Not surprised, because that sedans, like who's buying sedans that size anymore?
I still think the Maxima was cool. It had its own thing going. It was like powerful. It had that, or has that V6.
It was pretty good, I remember. It was like,
I thought it was cool.
reasonably
Do you know
luxurious.
that the Nissan Maxima, that was the first like press launch I ever went on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, in Quebec. And so it holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought it was cool.
I felt that way when the Honda Fit got discontinued a couple years ago, because that was the first vehicle I ever reviewed as an automotive journalist. And so when I saw it, being discontinued, I was so sad because it was so good. The Honda Fit was great.
The first press car I ever tested was a Volkswagen Beetle, so same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, man, what's going on here?
Yep. That's a sad one.
Taking a piece of my heart.
And then that's kind of the end of our list, but I did want to bring up the Chevy Bolt.
Yeah.
And the EUV.
Yeah, that's okay. Probably even more so than when I talked about the Ford Edge being like so close but not quite there, and could have been handled differently. The Bolt and the Bolt EUV, so they're going away, but they're coming back.
They're going to be on a hiatus.
So it doesn't really count.
Yeah.
But like, for those of you who remember, there were like some battery fire issues, so there was a big recall. I think that really put an end to this generation that was realistically only a couple years old.
Yeah.
Like, these ones only came out.
They're really new, and it's a shame because they're very good EVs.
Yeah.
They're so roomy inside,
so
tons
affordable.
of range, affordable, very user-friendly.
Yeah.
It had a lot of things going for them, so a little bit sad to see them go so soon.
Yeah, big time. Like, I think, and that, again, we talked about the affordability of cars in general and how, the Mirage is the only one. In the EV market, there are very few cars that are as affordable as the Bolt and the Bolt EUV, and losing them, takes that entry point from the market, and just tosses it right in the garbage.
Yeah, and that's very sad.
Yeah,
Boo.
that bums me out. But again, it's like, a hiatus, so there's going to be something in a couple of years. But it just means that, I guess, like, the only thing that you could buy as like the entry point, so to speak, into the Chevy EV lineup is going to be the Blazer EV, which is substantially
more expensive. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really a bummer, and I don't hold like any one automaker to a different standard and say like, well, you have to offer, you have to kind of fall on the sword for everyone and offer the cheap EV, but it's like somebody's got to do it, and I just feel like that was a good one, and now it's going to be gone for TBD.
Pour one out for our homies, Dan.
All right.
Before our Ask an Expert segment, here is a message from the good people at AutoTrader. Save time and money by using AutoTrader, Canada's most trusted place to buy and sell new and used cars. AutoTrader has the most cars, and one of the best features is price badging, so you can feel more confident that you're getting a good deal. So today's Ask an Expert comes to us from Anyeka from Ottawa.
Hello.
Hi, Dan and Jody. I just discovered your podcast and I love it. Oh, thank you so much. I'm in the market for a family, hybrid, or electric vehicle. My top two criteria are fuel efficiency and third-row passenger space. In your expert opinions, which models should I consider? I'm fine with minivans, vans, and SUVs. Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you so much, first of all. Also, I already know that we would get along because you're open to vans.
Yeah, I think I know what's coming.
Toyota Sienna.
It's great.
It is honestly so amazing. The efficiency is off the charts. It's got the same hybrid powertrain I would also recommend taking a look at the Toyota Highlander that you can get with the hybrid powertrain. It's the same one that's offered in the Sienna, but every time I drive it, I'm like, wow, I'm averaging, right around 6 liters per 100 kilometers.
Which is so good for a car that big.
It's just wild. My friends and I took it on a road trip down to Rochester back in the spring. And yeah, we did, an highway. So we've talked about this before, but if, you've missed those episodes, electrics and hybrids, they tend to do a little bit worse on the highway than they do around town, where they can rely on regenerative braking and coasting and all that good stuff. They got to work just a little harder to keep that momentum up on the highway. The fact that it was myself and 4, mostly grown men, I think I described them as. So 5 of us down to Rochester.
And all your
back,
stuff, all your
our
bags.
stuff, all the beer that we bought while we were down there and brought back with us. And still averaged it was less, I think it was maybe 6.4 liters per 100 kilometers.
That's so good.
It's crazy in a minivan.
Yeah, and I like the Sienna a lot because, it has that proven track record for reliability, but it also comes with a lot of really cool family-friendly features. Like, you can get it with a vacuum cleaner, you can get it with a fridge inside.
Well, hold on, I think they actually, were supposed to happen, and then I think the pandemic and supply chain shortage issues.
But maybe they're available now. I'm not sure.
But the point being, I think from a family-friendly perspective, from space, from storage, there's all these clever little cubbies everywhere. Lots of it is one of those vehicles that you get in and you're like, oh wow, this thing makes a lot of sense. So if you're open to that, I'd say check it out. The Chrysler Pacifica hybrid, which is a plug-in hybrid, it's good. I would say that's one of those vehicles that was not quite there in terms of it's kind of weird because you can't save, there's no setting to save the battery for later use. So basically if you unplug it and it's got a fully charged battery, it'll just default to draining that before switching over to hybrid operation, and then it's not nearly as efficient as the Sienna. Right. And then also the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid is also good, but if you're open to it, the Sienna or the Toyota Highlander are 2 very good choices.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you so much, Onyeka. If any of you have questions you would like to ask Dan or I, you can email us at expert@trader.ca. And thank you for joining us on this episode. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.